Can I say something about the mental health evaluations?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because that's come up in the last several years, and I will tell you, as a psychologist, I'm not interested in doing an evaluation on somebody and signing my name to something saying that they're safe.
Wow, yeah.
The liability for that, as much as many of my colleagues want to talk about the strength of science, psychology is still a soft science, and there is a lot of gray.
Yeah,
and so for me to evaluate somebody, assuming tools exist to elicit from them what's deep inside, how can you do that in 2 hours? Can you do that with just one 558 question psychological test? I'm not confident.
We ain't nobody. We ain't nobody. We ain't nobody. We ain't nobody. We ain't nobody.
But yes, episode 3, Nobody Knows podcast. Welcome to the crib. Of course, you already know who I am. I'm not going to keep saying who I am. You got to know by now. Twins.
This is Spencer Boliou.
Absolutely.
And
he uses his government name because of governmental constraints.
That does not jive with my inner being at all.
Your inner life.
No.
Did you nah, I'm not gonna make too much fun of that right now. But yes, today, for what we'll be diving into, we decided to bring in none other than Spencer's dad,
Dr. Boliou.
Hi, I'm Neil.
Dr. Boliou. So, if you don't mind, really quick, before we jump into the meat of the conversation today, why don't you inform us a little bit about your professional experience at this point?
Oh, sure. I'm in my mid-60s, so I've been around a little while.
Yeah, a little time.
Showing some age. And at a young age, I went into the military, and I was in law enforcement in the military, and I've got about 12 years of military law enforcement experience, and then that experience is what got me interested in mental health. So I got out of the military and went to school, and so I've now been a licensed psychologist for over 30 years.
30 years.
So I do a lot of family therapy, couples therapy, individual therapy, and consult on traumatic events.
Okay. So with your experience, I guess, within just therapy in general, there's a lot of buzz these days amongst many conversations about therapy and the importance of therapy. There's also a lot of, kind of over the top at sometimes, almost to the point where you would seem like an excuse as far as mental health is concerned. So with you being in that field, how would you say that balance how do you, I guess, differentiate that balance with there being like such a popularization now in a sense of, or I guess over, what would you say? How would you say it?
It's very trendy.
Sensationalized.
It's very trendy to talk
have
about all your mental health issues.
I got to go see my therapist.
It's good, but where do you kind of draw the line, at least from your professional perspective?
That's interesting. A lot of mental health professionals or counselors would say everybody needs to be in counseling. And in my experience, I've seen some pretty exotic things, but generally speaking, I would guess there's probably 10 to 15 different presentations that people come in with. They all have a unique flavor to their background, their experiences. But I'm kind of the opinion, it's just my opinion, that in the United States that there's kind of an overemphasis on getting counseling. The opposite, of course, is like just rub some dirt on it, get up and go on.
Right.
And that's a little bit too far the other way.
Exactly. I agree. I do agree there has to be like a balance between the two, and that's very easy, especially in just these we've kind of talked about hypersensitivity before, so we won't stay on that, but just in the hypersensitive society that we're in now, it's easy to sensationalize the need for it, because it's definitely needed, right? Therapy is definitely something that is needed. Counseling is definitely something that is needed.
Sometimes it's very brief. Sometimes it's very long.
Yeah, very extensive. Yeah, but then of course, like I think, just like anything, you can kind of use something to focus more so on like all the outward things and not your actual inner growth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the outward things are probably more along life coaching.
Right.
And the inward things are really core and becoming self-aware and aware of what my experiences, how they've influenced and flavored me on my outlook toward life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. So I guess
the joke is it's all about potty training.
I mean, it's fair enough. I guess with so in light of everything that has been going on within culture as of now, especially with the tragedy that's just occurred. Well, there's been a couple. We'll kind of get into the details of some of these later. But with the tragedy that is more at the forefront, at least, that we've seen with the school shooting, right? Obviously, there is a lot of outrage coming from everyone, at least generally speaking, the social media presence, right? There's a lot of outrage coming from that, and of course you have your media networks and all these different things that have their different spins on it, as well as the different posts that are kind of commemorating and attempting to mourn these lives that have went away and didn't necessarily deserve to, right? So with someone of your just your professional outlook as well as your experience, there's actually a shooting here.
Yes.
At the Boliou Mall, which is literally a stone's throw from here. It's like 5 minutes from where I reside, which is interesting in and of itself. But you actually had to deal with some of the aftermath of this shooting. People did pass away in this shooting. They were killed. So with that experience and kind of how you dealt with those individuals and communicated with those individuals, how much are you able to really extract, the necessity of mourning for a situation when you're not directly connected to it, right? A lot of people on social media are not directly connected to these shootings, but are, of course, mourning the deaths of these individuals when they're not directly family or whatever the case may be. So how much of that do you do before it's disingenuous, and how much outrage is actually, really warranted? A lot of people are just so outraged at this, right? Mm-hmm. So, of course, you can't tell someone how to feel, right?
The immediate response for many people in some schools of thought, one school of thought is that there's an acute, then an intermediate, and then a long-term adjustment to this kind of a trauma. And the acute part of it, which we've probably all experienced, is shaking your head, your mouth is open, and you just can't believe what's happened, and it's kind of dreamlike. And for several hours, often days even, people can walk around kind of in a daze trying to figure it out.
Right.
There's also a lot of reaction against it, but usually that kind of reaction is not the principal people involved. It's people who are more distant that are sort of taking up the offense. And part of it is a frustration at this tragedy, and there's got to be a way to prevent it. And so part of my job in trying to mitigate that is to try to get people to recognize that, try to avoid saying anything real specific for a while, and leave yourself room to grow and heal and go through this phase that could be several days of the shock and denial and just disbelief. And you're so many times these folks that are close to it, they're not going to sleep for several days, and their appetite is usually going to go down, but sometimes they comfort eat.
A lot of different coping mechanisms probably.
Yeah, and some of them are healthy.
Right.
And even healthy ones can become unhealthy.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you like to work out. So going and working out would be a good thing. Try to stick to a routine. But that routine could begin to consume you.
Yeah, especially like not eating and stuff like not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. So I guess with the individuals that you came into contact with, I guess what was a common thing that you saw with their outlooks? Because again, like you said, there are people that are not necessarily involved, right? That are not right. They were not in there. It's not their family necessarily. Yeah. Which is kind of what you see with these situations where you have a lot of people on social media reacting, right? And they're just like, they're sad about it. But of course, we have kind of the cycle that we see, right? Typically, when these events occur in more of an online space where the initial outreach comes, people kind of make their posts more in a little bit. It's talked about at some level. The news kind of keeps it, circulating. And then it kind of goes away. Well, I guess then you have kind of your arguments about, and we'll kind of segue into this. You kind of have your arguments about, in this case, okay, is gun control the issue? Is this the issue? Is this the issue? You have all these issues that spring up around it. That's talked about for a little bit, a little firestorm there. And that dies down. And then this is all forgotten in the next couple of months until it happens again. So with people that are actually in these situations, it's like their family. What have you typically seen as it pertains to that direct effect on them?
Well, the recovery for some people is quick because of genetics, resiliency, support system. So if you're a person who grew up in an intact family and you have a lot of loved ones around you and peers, and you've had some successes and confidence, like maybe you excelled in school in a sport or an instrument or academically in some way, those things all kind of build into more resilience. That said, you could have an absence of all those things and still be extremely resilient. It's kind of like some people in athletics, if they have loose joints, they're going to sprain an ankle or a knee more frequently.
Yeah, that's me.
But if you have tight joints, your capacity to tolerate stress on that joint is greater. So it stands to reason that people have mental capacity differences. And some people are just genetically wired to handle more stress than others. And so if someone breaks under stress, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a weak person. Their capacity is reached earlier. And we live in if one watches the media, you would think that the country's extremely polarized and divided. Events like this, as tragic as they are, have a tendency to bring people together. And then there are others who are going to exploit this kind of event for their own purposes and maybe popularity, and sow division when we really need to be coming alongside people and trying to understand them. Because, for example, the Cleveland Elementary School shooting that happened in, I think it was 1989, where I want to say 17, 19 children were shot and killed. Maybe it was only 5. One of those is now a police officer in the same area, and others have gone on to be activists. One young girl who grew up, she was arrested for murder.
Wow. Like very extreme differences there, choices.
Well, the reason I'm bringing that up is because this event that happened just here in Texas recently, Sandy Hook, even Orlando, Florida, with the nightclub,
the Pulse
shooting, the Pulse. Yeah, thank you. Las Vegas.
Vegas. Yeah.
Everybody that was involved in those just got re-traumatized.
Yeah, the triggers.
They have to kind of revisit all of that pain, and hopefully in a quicker time frame recover. But many will tell you that they've never recovered. Some will say, I've recovered really well. I appreciate life, the benefits that I have now, and they've progressed, and they would say it made them stronger or better because they have better focus. Others just are crushed under it.
Yeah, and I think that's like the sad part for me about these events. It's less about like the political positions that people try to take in these moments, and it's more so because to me that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is like kind of like what you're saying right now. It's like these events really have affected a lot of people close to it, or people that have went through something similar, which isn't probably like a vast majority of people that have went through something similar to this at that close of a proximity. However, it's like kind of like you were saying, the people that were in these different scenarios, it's like they do have to kind of sit with it again.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of leads me toward this next, I guess, question, or kind of segues me towards it. And I kind of want us all to weigh in on this. So you've obviously seen the tragedy here, right? A lot of people talking about it. So how do you feel when something like this is tied to, because for example, I saw this poster and it kind of bothered me a little bit. This is my personal perspective, but it bothered me a little bit because it likened this shooting that occurred to the pro-life situation that's been going on as well, with Roe v. Wade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it kind of seemed disingenuous, personally, to parallel those two at this time, to parallel them at all, really, but especially at this moment where literally, you know, it just happened, and then people were, had their signs and stuff. So, what are you guys' views on people kind of taking, you know, this tragedy here specifically, and then kind of tying it to like the pro-life thing and almost making it, bringing in gun control as well to kind of like make it to push these other things forward instead of just being present with and sitting with what just occurred.
Yeah.
What do you think, Spence?
You know, I think I haven't really thought about what I'm about to say before, but it hit me all of a sudden that, you know, most of us that are on the sidelines in situations like this, we want to be involved in some way, and you know, you see something terrible happen, and you want to do something about it. So everyone wants to talk about solutions and what would help. And I actually think, as long as you're able to give the appropriate time, like some time to recognize what's going, like the grief and the trauma that people are going through that are directly connected to the situation, then a lot of times the conversations around how to improve things like this don't tend to happen as much, just the nature of public opinion, like until something bad happens, and then we're like, okay, we need to figure out ways to help.
Again, yeah.
Right, and which usually we all hate it when this happens, because it immediately turns into like, oh, this gives an excuse for the Democrat Party to push what they wanted to push the whole time, and then the Republican Party to push or defend what they wanted to defend the whole time. And it tends to not really be directly about what would be objectively a good solution for
Across
this scenario across the board.
That's because those political solutions are the political process is complicated.
Yeah.
But the solutions that are being forwarded generally are kind of simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
The causes of it, if you look at school shootings or mass shootings throughout the last 40 or 50 years, the first school type shooting happened in University of Texas in 1966 with a former Marine that went up into a clock tower and killed like 14 or 17 people.
Wow.
And he had mental illness issues.
That's interesting. I literally said something about this the other day to Spencer. I was like, so that kind of makes me be like, man, because I was there like, it's not like you have, you know, these super trained people most of the time doing this. And then it's like, ironically, the one you reference is like a super trained militant individual. Yes. That's, wow.
So the simplistic answers within politics about hardening the schools or getting the guns off the street, which I believe certainly are part of ways to mitigate, but ultimately it comes down to a country that's increasingly polarized and divided and unkind and increasingly selfish when you're gonna see, regardless here in Texas, you're gonna see, regardless of race or political position, people come together for memorials and to help the families who have lost someone.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's going to get forgotten in the political battle.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that to me, again, like that to me is the saddest part about it, right?
Yes.
Is that you don't really get the opportunity to actually be present with and sit with what occurred, you know, in order to, because I really do believe if you sit with something long enough and actually absorb it, right, and you're paying attention to that specifically, the solutions that come out of it are less selfish because you're actually engaging yourself in a community focused, mourning or a community focused progression.
Yeah.
At that point, right?
Yeah, I think usually the reasons why someone like me who tends to be a fan of small government would want us to not immediately talk about solutions is because the only solutions that tend to be brought up are the government doing something to fix the problem,
Mm-hmm.
which tends to be making a policy that is going to affect theoretically like every American in some way in a short amount of time with a small amount of research and
Not
a ton
very
of
thought
emotion.
out. Yeah.
Right.
A ton of emotion.
Yeah. Whereas like I heard like a few people talking about this that earlier and like just doing a little bit of research about the shooting, but they were linking together like the most common commonalities between mass shooters and mass shootings in general, and like the number one was that they happen in gun-free zones, 95% of them or something like that, which that's very interesting. And then number two is that most of the shooters come from like a fatherless home and don't have a father, and that's not necessarily a political answer.
Right.
You can't just pass a bill and then have dads in people's lives
pop up.
And have dads be good dads.
Yeah,
Hey, so that's perfect because, like, I mean, with that, so then we ask ourselves, right? Is gun control what people are pushing a lot at this point? Is gun control the solution, or are there? Is this as a branch, in the elaborate like tree of issues? Is this as a branch, or is this more so a root where gun control is something that has to happen in order for these things to stop? Because that's what everyone thinks. A lot of people think the solution is, or at least, especially in social media spaces.
Yeah.
All guns are just particular types, because up through 2012, the mass shootings, I saw some research on that where it depicted the weapons used, and up through 2012, so that's not including Las Vegas and
Okay.
And since 2012, that 142 weapons used or events, only 35 were automatic assault weapons.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That makes sense. 'Cause that's totally the narrative that's pushed is like if we get rid of the assault weapons, it'll reduce the shootings, and it's not that much of a commonality. But yeah, I was thinking even you hear about the gun debate all the time, like how much would increase gun control or more background checks, which we do have a lot of already, but like, there could be improvements in theory in those areas.
I agree.
But if that is one branch, I think a branch that's even closer to the trunk, but still not even the trunk, is mental health.
Yeah.
We talk about mental health, right, too.
Yeah.
But then even past that, it's like, what is someone's upbringing and their family life
dynamic,
and all of that have to do with their mental health? Like if we just fix mental health, that doesn't fix a lot of the cause of probably the majority of mental health. I mean, there's of course people that are just born and they're sick and it just due to a genetic malformity, and it has nothing to do with how they were raised or their environment. But other than that, it's mostly like your environment, that really sets you up to.
Can I say something about the mental health evaluations?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because that's come up in the last
makes
several
sense.
years, and I will tell you as a psychologist, I'm not interested in doing an evaluation on somebody and signing my name to something saying that they're safe.
Wow, yeah.
The liability for that As much as many of my colleagues want to talk about the strength of science, psychology is still a soft science,
Right.
and there is a lot of gray.
Yeah, it's
And
human-
so
it's
for me
human
to
being.
evaluate somebody, assuming tools exist to elicit from them what's deep inside, how can you do that in 2 hours? Can you do that with just one 558 question psychological test? I'm not confident, and I would not walk into a court of law and try to testify with only one instrument and an interview. It's setting yourself up for failure.
That is that
So-
was well said. I can't even. Yeah.
If we're going to do these evaluations, who's going to do them, and what's going to be the threshold for yay or nay with someone being able to purchase a weapon?
Like, to remove someone's constitutional right, like, that has to be a pretty, I would think, scientific, objective standard.
That's the argument, right?
You know what I
Is
mean?
that
It's
it
hard.
shouldn't
It's
be.
hard.
It shouldn't. The argument with the gun control thing is like it shouldn't. You see people saying stuff like, if people only wanted to protect these children as much as they wanted to protect these guns.
Yeah.
Like that's a statement you see a lot.
That's true.
Which is a very emotionally driven statement.
Absolutely,
to me.
yeah.
But
Because we want to assign blame. We
Exactly.
want to find cause, and if we can find a cause, then we can try to come up with a solution to fix
right,
the cause.
it's interesting to me too that it would seem that a lot of people that say that don't even mess with guns.
Probably.
Like
I don't
in
know.
large part,
Yeah.
it's like and the thing is this, like obviously there are people that can probably get a hold of weapons, right, and do things, evil things with them, as we have seen across time. At the same time, right, these are the very same freedoms that a lot of these same people will scream about and take some level of pride in, because we are, what some would call the most free country, and we're protected, and that's in large part due to the military, which is the weapons. So it's interesting,
It's like the culture, what the culture of the Second Amendment produces. Like,
right? It's
it's deeper than just having guns. There's a
Exactly.
culture behind it that
right,
can
and so,
be helpful, and you can take it too far.
of course,
for sure.
of
You can
course,
take it too far.
absolutely. But it's like at the end of the
But
day,
there's value there.
100%.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like, obviously, people think you can just wave a wand, take all the ARs, because everybody keeps talking about taking away the ARs and stuff like that, which in reality,
ARs, AKs,
right? And they're talking about the difference.
GQs.
And they're talking about the difference in wounds. I saw a TikTok that was talking about the difference in wounds and why it's just so important to take these ARs off. And I'm just like, while you might be correct on your assessment of the size of the wound that comes from, a handgun versus an AR, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that. I'm not trying to, minimize that, but it's like, it's not obviously, if you're getting, shot with an AR versus a, it's different effect on exit wound and all that. But it's like things that are being focused on, because like you said, someone that has mental health issues, right? They have to get access to the weapon first. Now the question is, where are all these people getting access to these weapons? So now we're pointing a finger, and we don't even know where some of these people are getting access to these weapons. This kid was like, I think 18 years old.
His grandmother had
And
purchased them.
Exactly, and I guarantee you that she purchased them for protection. So why are we saying, oh well, okay, if he wouldn't have had access to a gun at this moment, then this would have happened, which is fair to say. At the same time, it's like, if not this moment, it would be another moment, And I guess people's answer to that is, well, if we just wipe out we take all the guns away, then none of this will ever happen again. It's like there was bombers, there was all sorts of, there's all different types of weaponry that can be used. If we're gonna attribute this to mental health, then it's like someone could do what they want to do.
Yeah.
What was
with
that
the tools they're
situation
given.
last Christmas? Was it November, December, the Christmas parade up in Wisconsin, where the guy drove the SUV? He had other reasons to be driving how he was driving, but he elected to go down the road where the parade was happening in order to get away from something else, when he could have gone a different direction, and he used a car as a weapon.
Yeah.
So if
And that's the thing, man.
Right? all kinds of situations like that.
You know, and I think
yeah,
I guess we shouldn't have any cars.
Guess not. But that's the thing. It's like, and I'm not, and again, I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that, you know, these are the vehicles that were used to, you know, literally murder these children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that lightly.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
but it's like these are the same things also that do grant us our freedoms. And I'm not saying that but allow us to protect our families and allow us to, you know, because let's just say since a lot of people kind of act in hypotheticals, it's like, let's just say the grandmother was able to get to, let's say they had multiple weapons in the home and the grandmother was able to get to the weapon before the son, you know, shot her. Mm-hmm. Then you create a very different and more difficult scenario there. Then it's like, should the grandmother have just shot him if she had, you know what I mean? It's like, it's you can't just answer a challenging, very deep-rooted issue with just a simple, like, if you wouldn't have been able to leave the house with it, then
that's why, you know, to go along with what you're saying, it seems like we're out here rightfully, I think, trying to find solutions to these problems, but we're consistently just addressing branches and not the trunk or the root of the tree.
And what ifs.
And what ifs as well. And so if we, I think we do have, I don't want to say it's a responsibility, but I would say, I mean, almost, like, I think it, in some ways, it is a responsibility if you live in a society where you know evil is going to happen, that we would talk about, like we're doing now, talking about the best ways to prevent this stuff. And, you know, because, for example, if this fatherlessness thing is very important in the development of someone that would go up and shoot innocent civilians, that's not to say that anyone doesn't have a father is going to do that. Like, obviously, it's a very small percentage, and it's not saying it's the family's fault if they do that. But we can't, in an attempt to not cast guilt on people, we can't ignore the fact that that's where these people come from.
That environment matters.
They come from that environment.
Yeah.
And so if we take this opportunity to, instead of coming together and being like, I'm going to scream at Congress, which maybe if there was a great solution, then that would be worth it. Maybe, but still, I'd hope it wouldn't be screaming. I hope it would be like a little more measured type of
the process
discourse,
is still the process is still, you know, not only just drafting this up, but drafting this up in a way where it's not people trying to slide their extra political agendas in there. And that's the challenge, I think, with a lot of these things, is that you present a bill, and that bill is literally to, you know, maybe at some level increase security here or there, or in these guns, you know, in these gun-free zones have, you know, something nearby or whatever. So you draw this all up. The problem is that with that, then you have these other little issues that try to slide in there and piggyback on the backs of these bills, which then bring things to a standstill, which then leaves them forgotten about, and then there's really no forward progression until something else happens and the outrage reoccurs and the triggers reoccur and everything is kind of at the forefront again, and then we're talking about the same thing again.
Maybe some reforming of how bills are written and passed. The piggybacking, how much of that, you know, what could be some adjustments of thresholds or parameters that a really good bill somehow doesn't have pork added onto it. How to prevent that?
I guess that's a hard part, because you obviously are gonna have political agenda in almost anything you do. So it's like, I think people have to, and that's where I think the ability to kind of remove just how you feel is super important. Because it's like, realistically, if we're looking at this from that standpoint, it's like these are infrastructural things that are in place. And so, you know, we could yell about it all we want to, right? But ultimately, it's like some of these infrastructural things have to maneuver themselves in a way that, like, kind of like you said, that bills that are put together are able to be genuinely constructed.
Yeah, I kind of would almost push back on that a little bit. Yeah, because because I think, looking to the government to pass something quickly, looking to the government's like designed. I know pork is unnecessary and that's increased as lobbyists have increased in the more that government has grown and then business has been able to capitalize on the fact that government's bigger and they get tangled up, and now there's all these competing interests within Congress. Like, I get that, but at the same time, it's like, man, yeah, if we rely on government policies to change these things, or if that's our number one, there's nothing wrong with that being maybe like your number 2 or number 3 approach, but it's like, why is government policy always our first go-to response? And I think that's partially because we're all looking for security, and everyone thinks the government is there to make them secure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a monster at the door, and we need the government.
It's also easy to put. I think it's easy to put responsibility on bigger machines instead of like community response, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to discount, when communities do get together and protest and do these different things or commemorate. That's not me like, poo-pooing on all of that. What I am saying though is that after that, right, it's like, I don't know how many people, and myself included, is like, I don't know how many people are 100% educated on all of their state officials and the Senate and all this kind of stuff.
It's hard to keep up.
Because there's so many people going in and out, right? But it's like, to me, it almost makes it mute. And I don't want to minimize what some people are saying. Some people are literally just talking out of emotion, a lot of these posts, but it kind of makes it mute to me when it's like, if we're not 100% kind of aware of what's going on at these different levels, to just point the finger at, big government and be like, all we have to do is push this through.
Yeah.
It's like, I hear you because you're how you feel right now, and I hear you.
If that really was all you had to do, then that would be amazing. That would be incredible.
Throw money at it.
I guess people just think that we're supposed to be in a perfect world and we're supposed to be in a perfect government, and that's but it's funny because a lot of this stuff only happens when it's issues that are outrageous to the individuals themselves. More so, like, of course, across the board, no one should want at any level for, children or people in general to be the target of these attacks. No one should want that across the board. But then it kind of sucks because it's like, then you see all these other things that are kind of like folded into that. And it's like the motives are not, the motives look clear when people fold all that stuff into it. It's like, okay, you're not even willing to acknowledge this long enough before you throw your other thing in there. So it almost like convolutes forward progress in a lot of these ways, because social media has made it worse, obviously, in a lot of ways, because everybody already had an opinion, but now everybody can post their opinion instantly. So
without discussion.
So it kind of convolutes the forward progression, but it's interesting. It's just interesting, I guess.
You said about being present, Wins, and I think that bears putting a little bit of time on about the being present with people who are in pain.
Yeah.
A biblical example would be Job and his 3 friends. And his 3 friends get a lot of flack, and they should, because they start telling him that there's got to be some hidden sin in his life, something he's missed or something he's not admitting to, and so forth.
For things to be happening to him that way.
But what's sometimes missed is that for 3 days, they just sat with him. How many friends do you have that would sit with you for 3 days in your pain and not begin to say, there's got to be something about you?
It's deep.
Yeah.
Nah, I can go into a whole other.
Yeah.
I don't even want to, because we talk about friends often.
No, for real.
But I do kind of want to.
Well, we have to wrap it up actually right now.
Yeah, it's kind of why I wanted to steer to this last thing really quickly here, between the 3 of us, or so. Really quickly here, do we separate the act, right, from these people in these situations, from the guise of quote unquote mental illness? Do we separate these things? And the reason why I'm saying that is because there was also, I guess, another shooting that occurred in Buffalo, and a lot of people are kind of talking about where the gentleman in Buffalo, shot these individuals and was arrested calmly, whereas the gentleman that shot these children was shot and killed. So of course you have the racial question there, right? Like, well, the other guy was fair skinned, he was white, so he got arrested peacefully, and he shot people, and the people that he shot, of course, happened to be all the people that he shot were color, and then black people, and then you have this scenario here where we don't even really know like all the individuals that were shot, at least their ethnicity, unless you obviously go look at that individually. But the gentleman that shot them was Hispanic, I believe.
Yeah, I think most of the victims were Hispanic too, at least from pictures I saw.
And then he was, shot and killed. So, you see even there like an imbalance, and a lot of people are like, well, and again, we don't live in a perfect world, but at the same time, it's like you see this imbalance of how things are handled, and you ask yourself, okay, how come in both situations is these people were not just taken down or taken out? If we're talking about the threat,
I'm a little confused at your question, because it seemed like you were differentiating mental illness from people who do it and then slipped into the ethnicity. So I'm not sure what you're.
The reason why I said that, my apologies, was because the gentleman that the shooting in Buffalo, they were attributing what he did to mental illness. Like when you heard it on the news or something, they're like, was he mentally ill? And then the first thing you heard in this other case
I'm pretty sure, I mostly heard white supprency is what they were talking, because he had some kind of manifesto. I think, about it.
And then he had stuff on his rifle and stuff that pointed to him, being racist or moving in that way. But one of the main things they were saying regarding that was that he was there. Like, was he mentally ill? That was what you heard on the news. Versus on the news in the other situation, that's not what was addressed first.
And the Virginia Tech shooting back in 2015 or 16, something like that, that guy was Asian and been bullied, so he was getting back at everyone.
Was he shot and killed too, or was he?
No, I don't. If I recall correctly, he did not get killed, but don't hold me to that. Okay. So relative to the mental illness is. Some people would say, like Governor Abbott of Texas said, that anybody that shoots another person is mentally challenged. Well, they're justified shooting, so it's kind of a blanket statement that probably could have been said better. Someone who goes and takes another person's life who did not do harm to anybody else, there's something bent in that person. So how do we prevent that? How do we stop that? And the roots or the trunk that Spencer was talking about, I believe it really comes down to a moral fabric upon which the country was founded, of people fleeing other countries to come here to self-govern, to have freedoms. But the founding fathers developed a constitutional government that's gridlocked on purpose so that things don't happen quick, so that no small group can do something quickly and consolidate power. So it's frustrating to us when it doesn't unfold how we think it should. Yeah. But over time, the hope, of course, is that they get it right, and then we have a political process where you unelect people if they're not doing what you want them to do as a representative.
Yeah, and I think the challenge, like I said, especially with social media, the challenge is, of course, it's like, people will simplify it and just be like, well, here you had a white guy that shot some people that were black. Nothing happened in terms of like him dying. He didn't get shot. You have a Hispanic kid that shot some people. He got shot. He was dead. That's it. So you have that. Then you
I think normally, like most mass shootings, like the shooter gets shot, like,
or they
regardless of race. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, I'm just saying, pretty like isolated scenario, because like.
But I'm saying within the fabric of where we're at now, it's like you have
like the response to it
in law enforcement. In law enforcement, what it's supposed to be,
you're supposed to shoot.
If the person stops shooting and puts the weapon down, you're not supposed to continue to use deadly force. It's not necessary any longer. So when whoever the shooter is if they're actively shooting, like there is a parent that was really upset in Texas because he said that police officers kept him from going into the school. And I don't know how it's all going to unfold because it's still, the timeline's still trying to be figured out.
Right.
But law enforcement, you're not going to let someone go into the school to rescue their kid because the officers inside don't know who that person is.
Yeah,
and
right.
there are scenarios, specific scenarios, where something has occurred in order to draw first responders in to assassinate first responders. So these situations, although it's emotionally painful to say, my kid's in there and I want to go get him, from the law enforcement perspective is like, stay out there, let us do our job. And
well, if
then
you're going there with
fear,
a gun and you're a civilian, then the cops might think you're the shooter and then
right,
shoot you. And
because they're amped up too.
Yeah,
man. There's just so many. There's so much.
And
so
then
many
you,
layers to this.
then you fear the cover up.
Yeah.
And the cover up,
Yeah.
an example of a horrible cover up that I just learned about recently was the Tulsa race massacre in 1921, I think it was,
like
in
Black
Tulsa,
Wall Street,
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And it's not in very many history books where 300 black Americans were basically murdered by mobs of white people over the property and the wealth that they were accumulating because of oil.
Oh, it was oil. I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Good old oil seems to be the root of all evil.
But
Golly.
The love of oil.
the loss of life is a big issue, but also it's the cover up of the information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Information.
That's-
Information is power.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they say. What's knowledge? But
Well, yeah.
that's what the saying would be
That's what
among
it said.
the world we live in. But
Yeah.
man, we're definitely gonna have to have you back. These conversations are good. It's just
That's
good to have. It's
been interesting.
It's good to have these different perspectives. Obviously, we're not, professionals in this space, but it's important to talk about these things as they are things that are, they are cycled through the culture that we live in, and as time goes, these things do, unfortunately, at times resurface and put us in position where you see that again. You see the outrages and you see the different things people are saying from Joe Schmo up the street to these celebrity people. So it's always interesting to kind of try to, at some level, offer perspective and dissect the things that you can, because kind of like you're saying, with the situations, it's like you can't just assume that it goes how it goes in your head. You can't just assume that if one of these children's dads was close by and they had the weaponry and the training to go in there, the law enforcement's going to allow them to do that, and that's
I'd have tried.
It's tricky, but
Yeah.
I would have tried. I would have,
Especially if the cops weren't there yet. I mean, I bet
Yeah.
that would make more sense. But yeah.
we'll definitely have to bring you back and talk about some other situations, because there's a whole lot we could have unpacked there.
That's true. That is
yeah,
true.
it's a big topic.
But thank you so
Yeah.
much for
Welcome.
for joining us. Nobody knows.
enjoyed it.
Padre.
We know we make things a little spicy here.
Yeah.
We turn the heat up a little bit, as it should be.
But thank you for rocking with us and
appreciate
and
it.
processing difficult stuff with us too.
Because
So,
this is
Yeah.
not easy stuff, light stuff that we like to touch on. So, but we do appreciate you again. We will definitely have you back.
Yep.
There it is. Everybody knows, man.
Yeah.
Spencer in by 10.
What? It's curfew all
You said you
over
better
again.
be home by 10.
Okay.
Messing
In
with
bed by 10.
Well, then we'll sign off. But
Much love to
Much
y'all,
love,
and
yeah.
condolences to
Yes.
those individuals
Yeah.
that were, those families rather.
yeah.
And also condolences to those that are, triggered by these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not light, and that stuff is, those traumatic events take time to process and to get past. So we definitely send our condolences and prayers to those that are that have been affected like that or at that level, because it's no light thing at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we do appreciate y'all for listening to us. Hopefully we offered some perspective. But yeah, we'll be back with some more things, of course.
Yeah.
Bye.
I guess we're signing off.